The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for attending. We're just waiting a few minutes so that the program director, Roberta Hills, can get logged on with us. She should be with us here shortly. But in the meantime, if you could raise your hand to let us know that you can hear us okay, that would be helpful. And do a sound check. Perfect. See a couple of hands raised. Thank you. All right. Well, you know what? We'll go ahead and start the meeting, and hopefully she will be able to join us momentarily. So welcome and thank you for attending the State Board of Nursing Stakeholder meeting via webinar today. Before we get started, we would like to introduce the staff members from the Division of Professions and Occupations that are present. My name is Elena Kemp, and I'm a regulatory coordinator with the division. Also attending, we have Steve Bursons. He's a contract policy analyst. And Darcy Magnuson, she's a regulatory analyst. And here, like I said, here shortly, we should have the program director, Ms. Roberta Hills, joining us as well. In compliance with the governor's orders regarding COVID-19, the division has transitioned to a platform that is 100% virtual, and we appreciate your flexibility. As many of you have been to DORA stakeholder meetings before, we would like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life and your business, so your input is important in the rulemaking process. Throughout this process, our goal is to create regulations that clarify and explain legislation, ensure minimum competency to enter and continue to practice, and provide only what is absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. Your input will be part of the information that goes to the board as it considers adopting revisions to the rules. More specifically, today we'll be discussing the implementation of Colorado House Bill 2012-16. That's the sunset review that continues the regulation of nurses. Also, we'll be talking about Colorado House Bill 2011-83. That's the sunset review that continues certification of nurse aides. Colorado House Bill 2013-26 that creates an occupational credential portability program, and Colorado Senate Bill 2102. That's the bill that requires providers to disclose discipline or convictions of sexual offenses. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the website at a later date. And as the stakeholder meeting is held solely via webinar, please raise your hand by using the hand icon if you'd like to speak, and we will unmute your line so you will be heard by everyone. Or you can type your comments in the question section and we can just read them aloud. For anyone that is planning on providing comments, please state your name and who you represent, if anybody, or if anyone. Feel free to provide either general comments on the rule changes or specific comments on the proposed language. Try to keep your comments limited to 3 to 5 minutes or less, and try not to repeat something that was already said. If you're just stating you're in full agreement with someone else, that works just fine, and we will note it. So if you're using audio through your computer, please remember to put your phones on vibrate or turn them off. And whether or not you're using computer or phone audio, try to keep background noises to a minimum when speaking. So at this point, we will go ahead and allow stakeholders to speak. We are currently showing the rules on the screen, and we'll go through them. Mr. Bursons is going to give us a little preview of the changes, the legislative changes. We've had stakeholder meetings covering these same changes before, but there have been revisions and updates to the rules to implement the comments that we've received. Mr. Bursons?
Thank you, Elena. Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Elena, can you hear me at least?
Yes, I can hear you.
So hopefully everyone can hear me. for participating in this webinar this afternoon. As Elena mentioned earlier, these proposed changes to the nursing rules were driven for the most part by legislation passed in the 2020 session of the General Assembly. And there are three primary bills that these proposed rules will implement. The first is the Nursing Sunset Bill, that's House Bill 2012-16, which continued the program of nurse licensure through 2027 and also made other changes to the Nurse Practice Act. The second piece of legislation is the Nurse Aid Sunset Bill, House Bill 2011-83, which also continues the certification of nurse aides through 2027 and makes other changes. And the third major piece of legislation that these proposed rules reflect is the so-called, actually the actual title is the Red Tape Reduction Act, House Bill 2012-36, which attempts to promote mobility for licensed professionals coming into the state of Colorado from other jurisdictions. So what I propose to do is to go through the more substantive changes that this rule package proposes. We're not going to cover every single change. There's a fair amount of technical changes, but we're going to cover the more substantive ones. And I will pause along the way and let folks ask questions or submit comments. So the first substantive area that I'd like to cover would be on page 5 of the proposed rules. So if we could go to page 5. Subsection F of section 1.1, which is licensure by endorsement. And here for the first time, because we're going to see this several times along the way, but for the first time, we're going to look at language that will reflect changes required under the Red Tape Reduction Act, House Bill 2012-36, which in effect gives a certain entitlement to those who are currently licensed in good standing in another state or U.S. territory and have substantially equivalent experience or credentials and have not committed any act that would be grounds for disciplinary action. So those folks who meet those requirements are entitled to licensure under the Nursing Act now. And so this proposed change to the rules reflects that requirement. So subsection 1 of F makes those changes. Subsection 2 provides that the board may deny the license if approving would violate any provision of the Nurse Licensure Compact, or the board demonstrates by a preponderance of evidence that the applicant lacks substantially equivalent experience or committed an act that would be grounds for disciplinary action in Colorado. So all of that is reflective of the Sunset Act requirements. And then the rest of this rule is for those who are not currently active, currently licensed in another state. The provisions are the same as they've been all along. Let me pause here and ask if there are any questions or comments on this first substantive change.
Okay, it looks like we have a few hands raised. If you still have your hand raised, just as part of our sound check earlier, if you could just lower your hand right now, that'd be good. So then we can differentiate between you wanting to speak. Okay, it looks like we have a Robin Sobieski. I'm sorry if I messed up your last name, but I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line now. Okay, you're unmuted.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to ask anything. I did put the hand down like you asked, so I apologize if that stayed up.
Oh, no worries. Thank you. Okay. Other than that, we don't have any. Oh, yes, we do. Sorry. Jenner, Miss Idika. I'm so sorry with the names. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line. Okay, you can speak. We can hear you.
Actually, I don't think I don't think I raised my hand.
Okay.
If I did, I was scratching my little hair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thanks.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Burson, I think you can proceed. There's no other.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about the next subsection of 1.1, and that is G, reinstatement and reactivation. And here we propose to do two things that are worth noting. One is we are combining the provisions that previously, or currently, I guess, were separate. That is reinstatement or reactivation of a license that has been either expired or inactive. Conceptually, this proposal would say it doesn't really matter whether your license is expired or inactive. The point is you have not had an active license for a period of time, and therefore the requirements to get active again are the same whether your license had been expired or whether your license had been inactive. So we're combining those because substantively it really makes sense to say the requirements should be the same to come active again. The second thing of substance that is being proposed here is that we propose to create a new category of inactivity or expiration. So between 2 and 5 years of inactivity or expired license is the new category, and if you fall within that category, you can become active again through continuing education, which was not allowed before. So it provides an easier way to get back into a active status if you're in that 2 to 5 year period. Less than 2 years, it's the same. It'll be the same as current, and past 5 years will also be the same as current. And I'm going to pause again for questions about this. Let me, while you're thinking about any questions or comments, I should also point out that a new important provision in terms of the proposed changes here is in subsection 9, which says that one of the ways that you can demonstrate competency in going back to an active license is to consider hours worked under a temporary emergency license, which would include the, under the current COVID emergency regulations, work currently under those would qualify as a way of establishing competency. So that's another important proposed change. Okay, again, I'm going to pause. Any questions, comments?
We do have a hand raised by Miss Diana Lekfi. I'm going to unmute your line now. Okay.
So I do have a comment. I think it's towards the top where someone had mentioned that It may or may not be possible for expired licensed individuals or individuals without licenses to get CE units. Well, I can clarify to that and basically speak on behalf of both all 50 other states and on behalf of other professions in Colorado that indeed you can get a CE, you can get CE units without having a license. CE units are quite often determined based off of the acceptance of the board. And I think generally in the context of this particular regulation and commenting to that, that would have been accepted. So any certifying CE accredited body would be able to provide CE units with or without a license, particularly as this is often used to renew and reinstate licenses in other states as well as in Colorado.
Okay, thank you for that comment and that clarification. That was an issue that was raised at the last stakeholder meeting, and we've made a note of it. And so before the board acts to actually adopt these proposed changes, we will make sure that we have that information before them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you identify where you're from?
My apologies. Okay, she's unmuted again.
Policy graduate student at the University of Colorado, at the University of Denver, I'm sorry. I'll be a law school student next year.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Looks like we have a hand raised from Miss Kathleen McInnes. I'm going to unmute your line now. Oh, it looks like you're self-muted. There you go. We can hear you, Miss McInnes. Hello? Okay. Maybe if you do want to speak, Miss McInnes, just raise your hand again and we'll unmute your line again. Looks like there may have been some technical issues there. All right, we have Mimi Billy. I'm going to unmute your line. It looks like you're self-muted.
Okay, hello. My name is Mimi Amabile, and I am currently in the refresher program, the AHEC program, which I started last fall. And I finished the academic portion and completed the exam, but have been unable for the last several months to do the clinical portion. And so I have two questions. My 5-year limit passed in August. I intended to complete the program before August and finish the exam in February, but starting in March, that became undoable. So my first hope, and I don't expect an answer from this today, but is that I can have an extension on my 5 years, because the requirements to complete the requirements are quite significantly different from 5 years to 6 years. And the other question is, after, if it's 6 years, which it looks like it might be, I'm still having an issue with the clinical portion. Now, I think there's going to be some simulation that's going to be provided as an opportunity to complete some of the 120 hours, but I guess that's not clear to me. Can you do all of the 120 hours by simulation, or are there some other additional or ongoing requirements that are going to be in a clinical setting, which I think is problematic?
And why do you think it's problematic, just to clarify your comment?
Well, a few reasons. The first one is they're kind of hard to find. I have applied for several jobs that would allow me to work and fulfill the clinical requirements, and there aren't a lot of them available, and I have not been able to find a job that would both provide cover all the bases that are part of what the clinical component requires, because a lot of hospitals are just not accepting applications. And I don't know of any hospitals offhand that will just take somebody for 3 weeks. And that seems to be a tall order. So I've tried, and I've gotten primarily in the Boulder area, which is where I live. The other part of it is a lot of the requirements to do a clinical are things that are often part of an orientation. So CPR, for example, getting insurance is often part of being a staff member. And they seem like kind of onerous burdens to have to fulfill those for 3 weeks of work.
So I think we can make a note of your comment here. I'm not sure it's going to be pertinent to the specific language that we're proposing, but is Roberta, are you with us now, and can you address either of the two comments?
I think what we've done in the past is ask that people put it in writing, and then we'll respond. You're right, Steve, it's not part of these rules. Other than the fact that the CEUs for the 2 to 5 years, she's right about that. I can tell you the insurance and CPR is related to all clinical contracts. It has nothing to do with the clinical competency. It has to do with meeting clinical contracts.
Okay, but it's still a requirement to participate in a clinical setting,
Right?
And the onus of that is put on the individual. And I guess I've heard that there are online CPR programs. I haven't looked because I haven't had a need to do it yet, because I don't know exactly what the future holds for me. But maybe you can address this question about the simulation then, because I know the AHEC program is starting to look into some simulation, and to me, in my mind, I should be able to do all of it by simulation. That's my hope. And understanding where the simulation is being used elsewhere, it seems reasonable to offer that to experienced nurses that have been out of the profession for a few years.
Okay,
I do think that Karen McGovern made an announcement about the extension of those to waive the clinical and allow the refresher programs to use simulation. So I think you might be right on that.
Okay, that'd be great, because I'd heard at some point that it was 50% still had to be done in a clinical setting. So that was the last I was made aware.
So again, thank you very much for your comments. We'll make a note here, and we'll see if there needs to be any change in the specific language here as a result of your comment.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Any other comments before we move on?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Darcy, there are some written questions. Melanie Church, what if you have an out-of-state license that is 2 years expired? Let me know if you want me to stop, Steve. So Megan Janner, so CEUs will fulfill someone whose license has remained active, but the nurse hasn't held a job in 2+ years. Holly Fast is just announcing that she was signing in. Erica McQueen, clinicals are crazy to have nurses do again. Erica McQueen, every nurse who gets who goes back to the workforce is going to get orientation. That should be the workforce's decision. Kathleen McGinnis, Professional Education Manager at Central Colorado AHEC RN LPN refresher courses. The draft rules no longer specify in-person clinicals, but indicate contact hours. Will refresher students be able to complete some or all clinical requirements via virtual simulation going forward? I think we already handled that. Jody Hammerly. My name is Jody Hammerly, and I'm in the RN refresher course along with Beamy, and I too have been trouble finding clinical sites due to COVID. Kathleen McInnes, will waiving the clinicals for refresher students be part of permanent rules?
Okay,
And that's it for written comments.
Okay, so we will capture all of those and consider them as we go forward.
And we do have a hand raised by Miss Christine Pateros. I'm going to unmute your line.
Hello, I'd just like to concur with the comments made by Diana Lufty. This is Christine Pateros. I'm in Boulder, Colorado. I'm an RN working with the emergency license, so I'm concurring to Diana Lufty's comments. I'd also like to comment on continued support on the rules to make the emergency license permanent based on current work and working as an RN. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I think we should move on now if there's no other comments. And I would like to go, if we can, to page 9 of the rules and subsection L.
Okay. Okay.
And a couple of things. The Sunset Bill did, by the way, remove the requirement that you had to be 55 years old to get a volunteer license. That age limit was not in the rules, so there's no rule change, but just to note that that's no longer a requirement. Also, this particular license is no longer referred to as a retired volunteer per the statute. It's now a volunteer license. And the proposed change to the rule is that an applicant who at the time of the application for a volunteer license holds an emergency active license will be deemed to satisfy the requirement of holding an active license. So your emergency license will qualify you for the volunteer license. And moving on to subsection 2B, there's the proposed language that experience under an emergency active license may be considered as evidence of competency for a volunteer license. And then you'll notice under M, we have deleted all of that because, as I indicated earlier, we've merged the inactive into the expired. So reactivation and reinstatement are now in one section. And then finally, I wanted to point out on page 10, section N, licensure of a military spouse. The Red Tape Reduction Act that we mentioned earlier also provides that military spouses can obtain at no cost a 3-year temporary credential for any profession or occupation, including nursing, if they hold a credential in good standing from another U.S. jurisdiction. So the proposed changes to licensure as a military spouse are proposed to reflect that new statutory requirement. So before we move on from section 1.1 of the rules, I'll pause for any questions or comments again.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any hands raised.
Okay.
Check the questions pane real quick to make sure.
Okay, so there are no questions. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, there's no further.
Okay. So then, I'd like to move on to I'm going to try to find the next. I would like to move on to page 32. In a new rule section 1.4 on confidential agreements, which are authorized for nursing under the Nurse Sunset Act, House Bill 2012-16. Other healthcare providers regulated by the Division of Professions and Occupations have had the ability to enter into confidential agreements for some time now, but this will allow those licensed under the Nurse Practice Act to also enter into a confidential agreement with the Board of Nursing. This subject has been discussed in the previous stakeholder meeting, as well as a special stakeholder meeting dedicated just to confidential agreements a few weeks ago. So many of you have probably been part of those discussions. Essentially what this says is that if you and or your healthcare provider believe you have a condition, a physical illness or condition or a behavioral health, mental health or substance use disorder that may affect your ability to practice nursing with reasonable skill and safety, you can apply to enter into a confidential agreement with the board. And if you enter into that agreement, and if you comply with the terms and conditions of that agreement, then your condition cannot be in and of itself the subject of or the reason for disciplinary action against your license. So I described it at the last stakeholder meeting. In my view, I think this is from your perspective as a licensee, it's a shield rather than a sword. It's something that provides you a certain level of protection under the circumstances of a condition that may affect your ability to practice. So I think it's something that is a potential benefit to licensees, and it's worth knowing about and taking advantage of it as warranted. So let me pause for questions and comments here.
I do not show any hands raised at the time.
Steve, I'd like to make a comment. I think it's specific to mental health disorders and physical disorders. I think substance abuse disorders are handled in another way.
So if that's the case, then we'll have to change the language of the proposed regulation here. So let's make a note of that, because it does say, I think it does say substance disorder currently. So let's make a note of that and change it if we need to.
And Roberta, this is Elena. Just to confirm, we need to potentially take out substance use disorder from the language here.
Well, it's covered with the peer assistance program that does have confidential agreements, but it's not under this statute. We do, I mean, there are confidential agreements, so it might be something we just check with Karen to make sure.
Yeah, well, we will definitely need to clarify that. Questions or comments from others?
Okay. And I don't show any hands raised from any stakeholders, so I think it's okay to proceed.
Okay. So let's go to page 35. And we are now in the section of the rules dealing with psych techs. And for psych techs, we are doing the same thing we did for nurses. Section 1.1, we're combining reinstatement and reactivation. And it's basically the same language. And then if you go to page 36, the next page, we're doing the same thing for psych techs with respect to military spouses. So I don't know if there are any psych techs participating in this webinar, but I'll pause for questions and comments now.
Mr. Bersons, there's no hand raised, no hands raised at this time.
Okay. Okay. Let's go to page 38.
Okay.
And just for your information, scattered through these proposed changes would be a change that amends references to the Nurse Practice Act to read Nurse and Nurse Aid Practice Act. And so under the Nurse Aid Sunset Bill, the two practice acts are placed in the same part of the Colorado statute. So there's a new title. Instead of separate acts, there's now the Nurse and Nurse Aid Practice Act. So I don't know that that warrants any comment, but I think it's interesting and important to point out.
Okay, there's no comment.
Okay. So let's go. Let's go to page 56, 56. And just to point out that we are now in section 1.10 of the rules. And the same provisions of the Red Tape Reduction Act that we've talked about earlier are also applicable to nurse aides, to certified nurse aides. So comparable language is being proposed as changes to the nurse aide rules. And I'm not sure whether there's any, we'll hold on to that because we're going to come to a pause in just a minute for nurse aides. Likewise, on page 58, the provisions with respect to military spouse is also being changed on page 58. Identical to what we've talked about before. And then staying with nurse aides, if we go to page 60, there are changes in the nurse aide scope of practice that were part of the Nurse Aide Sunset Act. So listed on the things that nurse aides can do, if you look at the bottom, very bottom of page 60, is administration of oxygen and also changing ostomy bags. There's also the some amended language in the case of medication. So in the case of a minor pre-sorted medication that has been sorted by the minor's parent or guardian, is something that a nurse aide can administer. There's also language that in the case of liquid medications that's been sorted, such medication must be in its original sealed container. And a standard measuring device must be used. And finally, in this section, the first dose of an antibiotic sorted by a minor's parent or guardian must be under the observation of a professional nurse, physician, podiatrist, or dentist who is present in the same patient care area. So let me pause here with respect to nurse aides and ask if there are any comments or questions.
Okay, it looks like we have a hand raised by Mr. David Bolin. It looks like we might. Oh, it looks like you're not connected to audio. So you could either connect your audio. You should have received a pin when you logged into the webinar, or you can just type your question or comment in the question section and we can just read it. Okay. Oh, and we do have another hand raised by Genevera, Miss Genevera. I'm unmuting your line.
Thank you so much. Prior to the CNS being able to give medications to patients or hand it over to them, are you suggesting in this meeting that are they going to receive any training prior to this or something they can just do? Because we have a QMAP training that we can prepare them to. Is it something that can be advised for CNS to receive like a as qualified medication administration personnel training before they can do that in any place.
So this part of the proposed rules do not speak in terms of training. It speaks in terms of what is within the scope of practice for the nurse aide. So I don't know, Roberta, can you help out on this specific question?
Right. The way the rule is, the context of it is that the nurse aide has to be deemed competent by a registered nurse who then assigns them this task for stable patients. And you have to be deemed competent annually.
Okay, are there other questions at this point or comments?
Checking now. We have a hand raised by Miss Susan Sevi. I'm unmuting your line. You can speak.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, good. So I've been, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, we're listening.
Hello? Okay. I've been attending these meetings each month, and I know last month there was a question by several people about the administration of oxygen, wanting a little more clarity on that, as far as, you know, what the meaning of administer would be on that, and I don't see anything written there with it. So I wondered if there was any discussion about making that a little less vague.
So there is a reference to a statement made at the previous stakeholder meeting, which you can read there. Administration of a previously prescribed non-titrated oxygen therapy. Is that the comment that you are recalling?
Yes, I just had I remember several people that needed some clarification on it.
Okay, if you have other suggestions as to what kind of clarification might be helpful, now would be a good time to share that with us.
I think, you know, one of the things people were asking, well, I guess really that covers most of, I think, what the questions were. I think they were wanting to know, you know, in terms of, you know, can they only turn it on? Can they only put the cannula in? Things like that. But when I go back and I look at that, I think that pretty much says what they're thinking there.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other comments? Questions?
This is actually Steve. We have another written comment from David Golden. When we discussed this with Rep. Mollica, we said that the parent or guardian needed to be determined competent by the RN prior to passing meds in home health care. If they are deemed competent prior to passing any meds, why do they need to have the RN present for an antibiotic?
Okay. So we need to take that comment under consideration.
It's because the antibiotic, many people are allergic, and you'll know the first time you give the antibiotic. And so you'll have to be prepared for emergent action if the patient has a response.
Any other questions or comments at this point?
No other hands raised.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Looks like she put her hand down. Okay. Oh no, I'm sorry. Never mind. They're putting their hands down. Okay, I think
Okay.
we could proceed. We could continue.
We're good. Okay. So if we turn now to page 84.
While you're scrolling, I'll just read a comment that came in from David Boland. This is Darcy. Parents and guardians know this already. That is part of being deemed competent.
Okay. Did Mr. Bursons, did we lose you?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Why did you think you lost me?
There was just
Okay.
a long pause. Sorry.
That's right. I was listening to you all. So if we go to page 84, I just wanted to point out another change that was made in the Nurse Sunset Act in the designation of advanced practice nurses are now referred to as advanced practice registered nurse, and the acronym of APN is now APRN, and so you will see changes throughout the proposed rules to reflect that statutory change. Okay, so if you go to page 95, and you'll see once again, yet another reference to the Red Tape Reduction Act. And this is for the Advanced Practice Registry, and the same essential provisions that we've talked about previously are applicable here as well. Okay, so now if we go to page 100. And we are now in section 1.15 regarding prescriptive authority for APRNs. And you will note that on page 100, what was subsection 5 relating to articulated plans, the proposal is to delete that language because articulated plans were deleted in the statute. So articulated plans are no more, and so we need to change the rules to reflect that. Going to page 103, under section 2, requirements for original full prescriptive authority. The previous requirement was an attestation of successful completion of 1,000 hours of experience in a mentorship. And that requirement has changed by statute, the Nurse Sunset Act. So now that the requirement is 750 hours, of experience in a mentorship. So we are proposing to change the rules to reflect that change. And then also deletion of a reference to articulated plan in the following two subsections. And throughout this, the remainder of this section 1.15, you will see proposed changes from 1,000 hours to 750 hours, and also the deletion of all references to an articulated plan. So let me pause now and see if there are questions or comments.
Okay, I have a hand raised. Miss Erica Ludke. I'm going to unmute your line now. Oh, it looks like you're self-muted.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Good afternoon. My name's Erica Ludke, and I am a recently credentialed adult gerontology nurse practitioner. And I just have some feedback surrounding the requirements for provisional prescriptive authority. There's the 3-year requirement of nursing experience prior to obtaining provisional prescriptive authority. And I believe that this is an unnecessary burden for entrance to practice that primarily affects APRNs of direct entry programs. The majority of traditional route MSN graduates will have met this requirement, having completed the prerequisite RN work, followed by a 2-year MSN program. Direct entry graduates are therefore excluded from applying for provisional prescriptive authority by this rule, and peer-reviewed evidence demonstrates no correlation between prior RN experience and either academic or APRN success. Of 9 other states with transition to practice, those states do allow they allow independent practice, but they have a collaborative agreement for transition, or prescriptive authority, but a collaborative agreement for transition to practice. So I would strongly advocate that Colorado follow suit and this 3-year rule be amended.
And this is Elena. Can you point me to the subsection that you're referring to so I can save these notes?
Yes, of course, I would be happy to. I am referring to subsection 1.15, entitled The Rules and Regulations for Prescriptive Authority for Advanced Practice Nurses. And then it's part B under purpose. And number 4 is the requirement for at least 3 years of combined clinical work as a professional nurse or as an APRN.
So are you the author of a very well-written letter that you've already submitted?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. All right. Well, I've read that letter, and for sure that will be called to the board's attention.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on APRNs, the proposed changes?
There are no further hands raised. Let me go to the question section. It looks like we have a couple of comments.
A couple of written comments?
Yes.
Is that it? Okay. Are you going to read them now?
Yes.
Okay.
When this comment is from Mr. David Boland. I think Darcy may have read this.
Yeah, I think we're up to the last comment. I think we're good with written comments, Lena.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you for clarifying. All right, Mr. Burson, we're caught up on John.
Okay. Let me find out where we are. Okay, so now I've skipped over something, so I have to find out, and if anybody can help me find it. I'm looking for the new reporting requirements. So I think where we are is on page 110. Rule section 1.16. So there are some new changes for with respect to duty to report, which were brought about by the Sunset Acts that we talked about. So the duty to report, if you look under section C1, the duty to report convictions for licensed nurses was changed to 45 days. I'm sorry, changed from 45 days to 30 days. Those convictions have to be reported within 30 days. And in the case of a okay, so I'm going to ask for help, Roberta, because I'm getting tripped up here in my own thinking. Can you rescue me here? License have one period of time, and certified nurse aides have another, but I'm getting confused. So, Roberta, can you help?
The nurse aides have 45 days. That was not changed to report convictions, but the RNs are to report in 30 days.
That was it.
And LPNs.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to correct myself on something I said earlier about your confidential agreements, but the statute says what you have. So I think you're accurate and I was wrong.
Okay, but we'll still revisit that to make sure that we have it right. And thank you for the clarification on the number of days to report a conviction. And now under D of this section, there are some new reporting requirements. So licensees are now going to be required to report within 30 days a final judgment or settlement regarding malpractice action, any adverse action taken against the individual by another licensing agency, the surrender of a license. All of those have to be reported within 30 days. And so those are the substantive changes here. Let me pause to ask if there are any comments or questions.
It doesn't look like we have any hands raised.
I had some trouble hearing that last statement.
Sorry, we don't have any hands raised.
Okay, all right, so we'll move on. I'm getting to the end here, close to the end. So let's go finally to page 148. And this is a new requirement that applies not to just to those regulated by the nursing board, but to others as well. And it requires a disclosure to patients of any conviction or discipline based on sexual misconduct. And so there are provisions relating to that disclosure, and there's a suggested form of disclosure which will be included as an Appendix A to the rules, and you can see that on the next page, page 149. I think that's a pretty straightforward requirement, and pretty much the rules pretty much track what's in the statute. And let me pause here for questions or comments.
We don't have any hands raised.
Okay, so thank you very much. Is any questions or comments on anything that we've covered or anything we haven't covered that we should have covered?
Steve, I'd like to go back to that confidential agreement and kind of explain what I think the difference is.
Oh,
Okay.
It looks like we actually do have a hand raised by Ms. Colleen Casper. I'm unmuting your line now. Oh, it looks like you're self-muted.
Sorry, Dr. Hills. I am eager to hear your clarifying points on the confidential agreements, but I just wanted to clarify, do the rules need to reflect the statutory language changes specific to delegation by RNs, LPNs, APRNs to unlicensed personnel?
Yes, and maybe we skipped over that. They aren't massive changes, but there are changes that reflect that new delegation available.
Then do the rules need to reflect statutory language changes to the LPN scope and patient assessment? I'll also write it so you have it for follow-up.
Yes, for sure, and I'm not able to respond to that off the top of my head, and let me ask again for help from Roberta. Can you respond to that?
I think we said at a previous meeting that the scope of practice for the LPN and the RN is based on, is not really spelled out in these rules, except for like IV authority and medication aid authority for nurse aides. So it's in the education rules that that practical nurses are doing health assessments, basic health assessments, and we added delegation in those
Yes.
in the education rules. And then they will be under the same requirements of that rule 1.13, which is delegation. And I think Steve has put practical nurses in many places there to show that they now have that in their scope.
Okay. And then two more. One is, do the statutory language changes to the definition of nursing specific to the independent practice need to be reflected in rules?
Ms. Casper, if you can tell me what particular, like the exact rule, so I can put it on the screen that you're referencing.
Right. So mine's more of a I don't know what you'd call it, but I'm more familiar with the statutory language than I am the rules process. So just to let you know that up front. So I know we changed the definition of nursing in statute to reflect that much of what nursing does is autonomous or independent. And I want to make sure it gets carried into rules as well.
So at least up until now, I think the answer is that was our belief that it did not warrant any rule changes.
Okay.
So we may need to revisit it. So do you have a specific statutory reference that we can take another look at and make sure
I will get that to you in writing.
Great, perfect. Thank you.
And then one final question. so what happens next? Are these going to be reviewed at the October 28th board meeting and they say yay or nay, or what's the process next?
That's it. That's what happens. So
Okay.
And I believe that they will adopt it on an emergency basis and a permanent basis in order to get a necessary effective date.
Okay, and that will be established at that meeting.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. It's all yours, Dr. Hills.
Right. The statute does include alcohol use disorder under confidential agreements, so that needs to be in there. We currently have confidential agreements for people with alcohol use disorder, but that's once they have violated they're being disciplined, and if they're willing to do a confidential agreement and they meet the requirements of that, then they will do that with PAS. But if they report their disorder up front, then they fall under this confidential agreement, is how I see it.
So this was raised in the last stakeholder meeting, and I think there's some confusion as to the relationship between the statutory confidential agreement provision and what has traditionally been available through peer assistance. So
Right.
I think that's going to need to be clarified either in the rules, and if not in the rules, then by some publication that make it clear.
Right. But the statute itself says that you can only have a confidential agreement if you have not met the grounds for discipline. So if we happen to know about you because because of grounds for discipline, then I think the one we've been using will kick in.
But for sure, I think the board will need to clarify it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So are there any other comments or questions? Well, thank you all very much. I'm just going to turn it back over to Elena, but thank you all for your attentiveness and for your questions and comments. Appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, it looks like we don't have any other comments. Let me look at our written comments.
The one from Laura Nixon, I think, is the only one. I think Colleen Casper sent in her written in addition to her talking, so I can read from Laura Nixon. Was there a discussion of the updates to the APRN rules where they may function independently now that the requirement articulated plan has been eliminated, or is that only in reference to APRN with prescriptive authority?
Roberta, are you able to speak to that?
I think the articulated plan, I think, has been eliminated.
Yeah,
Was that the question?
The question was read a little too fast for me to even hear it, much less understand it, so I'm not able to respond.
I can reread. I do tend to speak quickly, so I apologize. Was there a discussion of the updates to the APRN rules where they may function independently now that the requirement articulated plan has been eliminated, or is that only in reference to APRN with prescriptive authority?
Okay, now I heard it, and I'm still not able to answer it off the top of my head, so we need to, unless...
Well, the articulated plan was related to people with prescriptive authority. It's not required for people who are on the APRN registry. But if you have prescriptive authority in the past, you had to have an articulated plan after you were had full prescriptive authority, but that was all eliminated in this sunset.
Okay.
Thank you. And then we had one other question about getting a final draft of the rules, and they will be sent out with the notice of rulemaking hearing. They'll also be posted on the board's website.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any other hands raised. I believe that was all the written comments received. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed with the stakeholder meeting. The stakeholder comments and program recommendations will be presented to the board prior to the formal rulemaking hearing, which is scheduled to begin at 9:15 a.m. on October 28th, 2020. If there are no further comments from stakeholders on the webinar, then we will conclude the stakeholder meeting. And we do want to let you know that we appreciate all the input that we've received via written comments and by attendance during these stakeholder meetings. And if there's something that you later on want to send to the board, you can always send written comments to the email address, our general rulemaking email address that was sent on the notice. And for the people that need it again, that email address is Dora_DPO_rulemaking@state.co.us. And we will accept comments up until the date of the hearing. However, for the board to properly have enough time to consider the comments, we'd like them at least 2 weeks prior to the hearing. Okay, well, I'm going to end the webinar now, and thank you again for attending.